Most people think driving fast on a new track is a game of spending hours learning and memorizing every single corner to perfection, but it's not. What you actually need is a simple step-by-step system that lets you put down competitive lap times without you needing to devote all your time to racing. So in this video, I'll show you exactly how to do that. I'm Jimmy Grills, a top 2% iRacing driver and professional coach who's helped over 100,000 people get faster sim racing, and my goal is to do the same for you. When driving a racetrack, one of the most important principles a driver can internalize is that not all corners are created equal. Fast lap times and consistent race performance come from understanding which corners matter most and adjusting your driving accordingly. That means learning how to prioritize corners based on their importance to overall lap time, and this was probably one of the biggest unlocks I had when I first started learning to sim race. To be honest, I thought to myself that the other drivers had some special car setup that made them way faster, but that wasn't the case. They just knew which corners actually mattered, so they could spend their time learning and perfecting the ones that actually led to huge time gains. Think of it like getting the biggest bang for your buck. Would you rather learn a corner well that will knock off a whole second per lap, or one that will only save you a tenth if executed perfectly? That's the basic premise of prioritizing corners. So how do we determine which corners are the most important? There are two general perspectives. One is based on lap time, so identifying which corners yield the most time gain or loss. The other is based on challenge, identifying which corners are hardest to drive consistently at the limit. So let's explore both. If you analyze any track, you'll see that there are only three types of corners. The first type of corner that exists are corners that lead onto a straight. You may have heard that the most important corner to prioritize is the corner leading onto the longest straight. The logic is simple. The sooner you get on the throttle, the faster you are over that length of the whole straight. So focusing on nailing that corner by getting a nice early acceleration will lead to massive time gains when driving down the straight. And while I 100% agree with this idea, I think it's just one piece of the puzzle. If we really want to find the number one corner to prioritize on an entire circuit, it would be the fastest one leading onto a straight. This is because faster corners are more difficult to improve upon. If you gain just 1 kilometer an hour more in a fast corner, that gain carries all the way down the straight, and it's harder to achieve than gaining 1 kilometer in a slow corner. This concept, if you're entirely new to it, is a bit difficult to wrap your head around. I know it was for me at least, so let me use an example. Imagine comparing two corners. One is an 80 km per hour hairpin leading onto a long straight. The other is a high-speed 200 km per hour sweeper, also leading onto a long straight. While the hairpin may feed into a slightly longer straight, it's much easier to make up time in that slow corner because the car accelerates quickly at low speeds. In contrast, gaining speed out of the 200 km an hour corner is much harder, but far more rewarding if it's done right. And to really drill into this idea, think of when you're driving on the street. It probably takes around 3 seconds to go from 0 to 50 Ks, but if you wanted to gain 50 Ks going from 150 to 200 kilometers in your street car, it might take 15 seconds to get that same speed increase. Improvements in fast corners have a magnified effect on your lap time. Real quick, if you want to join a community of racers, get access to a full 30+ video course I made on car handling and a lot more, then check out Sim Racing University. Link is in the description. Fast corners are also where many drivers fall short. They're more intimidating and they demand higher levels of precision and confidence. That's why perfecting them is one of the quickest ways to outperform your competition. The slow corners, by comparison, are typically easier to figure out. So the most important corner to focus on learning well first is the fastest corner that leads onto a straightaway. The second most important is the next fastest that leads onto a straight, and so on, down to the slowest corner that leads onto a straight. So, for example, if a track had 4 turns all leading onto a straight, One was 120 Ks, one was 180, one was 100 kilometers, and the other was 70 kilometers, I would learn the corners in order from the fastest corner to the slowest. So it would be 180, 120, 100, then 70. And whenever someone asks, why is it so important to optimize our acceleration? So why do we try and accelerate early onto a long straight? Why do we prioritize these corners? I tell them this. And when I first heard it, I couldn't help but smile because it was something so obvious but so true. It just struck home. I want you to imagine any race circuit. Now, what percentage of time do you spend under braking? And what percentage of time do you spend accelerating? For most tracks, it's around an 80% accelerating, 20% braking split. So if we want to drive fast, we need to optimize the thing that we're doing most, which is accelerating. A couple examples of this type of corner would be the final bend on Mugello because it has this enormous back straight, or the final turn on Laguna Seca. Once again, a massive back straight. Just think of any corner that leads onto a long section of track that you don't need to lift the gas pedal for or brake. So the second type of corner that exists are corners that happen at the end of a straight, which don't have a usable straight after it. These are your next priority to learn. You'll still approach these corners at high speed, so braking technique is key, but your exit speed matters less. These corners are more about extending the long straight that you're driving on for as long as possible by braking deep into the corner and sacrificing some exit speed. In the same way as our last type of corner, you'll learn this style of corner starting first with the ones that are the fastest and working your way down to the slowest. An example would be Okayama Turn 5, which comes from a massive straight but doesn't lead onto a large straight section of the track. The third type of corner that exists are the corners that link other corners together, commonly referred to as connector or transition corners, and these are your final priority to learn. These are less about outright speed and more about setting up for the next important turn. They're where you make compromises to optimize other corners. If we continue with the Okayama example, Turn 5 is a corner at the end of a straight that doesn't have a usable straight after it. Turn 6 is our connector corner we just learnt about. The aim of this corner is to set up the car's direction and positioning to optimize Turn 7 so we can get a good exit onto that straight portion of the track. So the order of corners to learn first that will provide you with the biggest time finds are fast corners that lead onto straights. Then you progress down to slower corners that lead onto straights. Once you've learned all of those, you learn corners at the end of straights. Once again, learning the fastest corners first before moving to the slowest ones. And finally, you learn corners that link other corners together. But now that you know the importance of prioritizing corners that lead onto straights, watch this video to learn the actual technique on how to do that.